Between 1849 and 1882, approximately 300,000 Chinese entered the United States.
She admitted that the Native Americans are Asians. They're Siberians.
They're not actually the same thing. Native Americans being mixed is a key part of how we prove we were already here. Look at Kurimeo Ahau. Look at Mike TV.
When y'all say that this is biblical, what do you think that is?
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up out of your sleep, sleep.
A couple weeks ago, Dane Calloway boldly, gotta give him his flowers, he boldly exposed the truth in a way that I think went over a lot of people's heads. Partly because he himself might have a little confusion on this topic too, but it led me to the following question. Why do we tend to oversimplify history? It's usually because one group can retroactively seize hegemony over others by oversimplifying history. Negro identity is a casualty of oversimplified history, and that's what makes our identity more complex than that of any ethnic group on the planet. Many of us are now discovering that Grandma downplayed the truth when she told us we had Indian in us. In all reality, we are the Indians to begin with. The problem is that now that we're learning this, I see many of our people doing the same thing the white man did, oversimplifying history in order to aggrandize ourselves. No claim makes this problem more palpable than the astoundingly pervasive idea that Native Americans are actually Asians who came to America during early US history, and at that point, whites deliberately replaced us with them somehow. Then we forgot, presumably because the white man sociologically manipulated us into believing we were Africans even though we had no clue what an African was, since no Africans were ever brought here apparently, because of course we're all fully Indians. Not only is this a gross oversimplification of history, but it also reeks of a black inferiority complex. So you're saying we were playing checkers while the white man was playing three-dimensional f*** you, which means he was genuinely head and shoulders smarter than us, in which case he truly has earned his rightful place above us, and we should just accept that. He apparently ran circles around us and we didn't figure it out until the 2000s. We needed the internet age to come just so our dumb asses could even see how brilliant his 400-year plan was. You're saying we're actually so confused that most of us don't know that a bunch of Asians snuck in here through the back door and replaced us without us realizing it in real time because the white man was on the front porch distracting us with all this talk about Africa despite the fact that he never brought a single African over here? If that's true, then we deserve the L. And if we're that far behind our opponent, how do you know all this information we're finding out about us being indigenous isn't some sort of reverse psychology that the white man's playing to lure us into another trap? If he's that damn good, there's no way he just overlooked the fact that the truth was left sitting in the open. I mean, we would have no way of knowing since we're clearly intellectually inferior. Or is it possible that this whole logic is actually just a product of us being lazy? Those who have been with this channel for the last few months know that I have produced a lot of receipts to demonstrate that Native Americans aren't uniquely Asian. They're actually just mixed people. They're a mix of Amerindian and European. We are their Amerindian ancestors. We're the full-bloods. I did a 15-minute presentation on the history of reservations to show you that reservations were originally called half-breed tracts, land allotments designated for the mixed descendants of Indians and white settlers. I'll put that video on the end screen after this, but I also did a presentation about how we know that the modern Cherokee Nation specifically is mixed, and that in the Indian removal process, the mixed Indians left the full-bloods behind in the wilderness of their original territory. We stayed, and they went to live on their half-breed tract in Oklahoma. Today, we're gonna prove it again. This time, we're gonna focus on different tribes though. I'll say it again, Native Americans aren't modern Asians. They're not even medieval Asians. The best term for them, in my opinion, is Euro-Indians. Mind you, even our best known researcher, Dane Calloway, who may have opened more eyes than anyone, has led us to explore this Asian Native American connection. Remember, the question is whether Native Americans are Asians who migrated here in recent history or mixed descendants of black Aborigines and Europeans. Here's Dane Calloway's take.
I mean, just listen to her opening statement.
No one's disregarding the natives, they just came from Siberia, they are Asian. I learned this in elementary school before it became an agenda, before...
She admitted that the Native Americans are Asians. They Siberians. She said she learned about that in school. And if you think about it, didn't you? But notice how we didn't pay much attention to that. We just bypassed it. I haven't watched all of these videos, especially in full. So again, let me put my disclaimer out there. That does not mean that I agree with everything that they're stating.
And you'll notice Dane himself isn't committing fully to this idea either. That's what the disclaimer is for. Why? Because his role isn't to hold you to one idea. That would be a religion. He has always said he's just here to make you think. He's never done thinking and learning, so he's not going to pigeonhole himself to the idea that Native Americans recently migrated from Asia. We'll come back to the video because Dane drops a bombshell after this part. But let's deal with this first. So here's the thing, I want to show you how we know that Native Americans are a mix of black and white, but first I want to tackle this whole Siberian thing. There were multiple waves of migration flows out of Asia and into America over the course of thousands and thousands of years. The Chinese woman brought this up, and Dane Calloway said we should remember learning that in school, but that we overlooked it. I was a nerd, so when my 6th grade social studies teacher went over that, I did not overlook it. If you notice, this Chinese woman didn't say she got this information from any particular research on this on her part. She said she learned it the same way we all did, which is school. So we're talking about one of three things. We're either talking about Asians migrating to the Americas centuries ago, but within the last millennium, or we're talking about Asians migrating to the Americas multiple millennia ago. But the third alternative would be that we're referring to the much less significant migration in the 1800s. The only migration that's pertinent to modern Native American identity is the one in the 1800s, especially since the most recent Asian migration wave before that would have been about 2,400 years ago. That's before Alexander the Great, which is before Jesus, which is before the fall of the Roman Empire, which is before Genghis Khan, which is before Mansa Musa, which is before Christopher Columbus. Just FYI. So my point is, we're either talking 1800s or pre-Jesus. Now, by the time of the 1800s migration, it's mostly Chinese immigrants, and that migration starts after Indian removal has already happened. Indian territory is now Oklahoma, Nebraska, and the Dakotas. Keep in mind that these states are all bottlenecked in the middle of the country. The Center for the Study of the Pacific Northwest reports, quote, during the 1800s, as the Chinese Empire collapsed under pressures imposed by other nations, rapid population increase, declining standards of living, and problems in government, Chinese sojourners began moving to the New World, and particularly to California, where the gold rush had attracted the attention of migrants from around the globe. Between 1849 and 1882, approximately 300,000 Chinese entered the United States. Many entered more than once, taking return trips to China. Others left and never returned. As a result, the 1880 census counted only about 100,000 Chinese in the U.S. End quote. Okay, so all that Asian migration starts affecting West Coast at a time when a lot of federally recognized tribes have already been consolidated on half-breed tracts in the central U.S. We can also see here that the Indian removal era ranges from 1820 to 1850, which is ending after the first year of Asian immigration. This is coming from Howard University Law Library. For what it's worth, that's an HBCU. And by the end of Asian immigration, we're only looking at 100,000 Chinese American citizens confirmed by census. EBSCO adds that, quote, the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 forced most Chinese railroad workers to become farm laborers in California. Many others had to migrate south and east, working in southern plantations or in new booming towns on the East Coast and in the Midwest. So Chinese immigration didn't manifest in Indian territory to any meaningful degree. I challenge anyone to demonstrate any substantive encounters during this period between Asian immigrants and Native Americans. And I know that some of you are going to say, if the Native Americans aren't Siberians, then why is this Chinese woman saying they are? This is actually a common fixation among Pacific Rim cultures like those of China, Japan, and Korea. You don't have to be woke over there to be exposed to this trend in those cultures. They know that scientists have linked prehistoric Americans to the Asian continent, and they also remember when economic collapse in China sent a lot of Chinese immigrants fleeing to the US. They actually like exploring that connection to the US, which is why Tekken, a Japanese video game, features a prominent mother and daughter pair named Michelle and Julia Chang. Michelle's a Native American mixed with Chinese ancestry. But they still acknowledge that that's not what a Native American is, because they call it a mixing of two different races in her bio. And Julia's adopted, so her ancestry is actually irrelevant. But the next thing you're going to say is all these sources you're using are just lying to cover up the truth because they don't want you to know that Native Americans are just Siberians who replaced us, bruh. To which I rebut, oh, so you don't trust Howard University, a black institution, but you originally brought this up because you did trust McGraw-Hill. You don't trust the white man's numbers on Asian immigrants, but you trust the school that told you that you were just an African slave? If they're hiding something, why even tell you about Asian immigration in school? Are they lying or not? Last thing. The reason I keep using the terms Siberian and Asian interchangeably is because Dane Calloway did so. Not sure if you caught that or thought about what's wrong with that, but they're not actually the same thing. All Siberians are Asians, but not all Asians are Siberians. Chinese people aren't Siberians. Siberia is north of both China and Mongolia. And it matters in this context because if you're talking about Native Americans being Asians who immigrated in the 1800s to replace us, then you're talking about Chinese people. If you're talking about a Siberian migration, that's a prehistoric thing allegedly going as far back as 20,000 years ago. This is why I couldn't be sure which migration Dane was talking about, but I assumed it would be the recent one because that makes the most sense. These issues make Dane's video a little problematic, but that's why he always tells us to do the research for ourselves. Doesn't he always tell you to look into his topics on your own? He says that because his job is to make us think about a topic we haven't investigated yet. But we still have to do the work. When we're parsing history, we can't afford to oversimplify. Now, given that they're definitely not Siberians, and there's no evidence of contact between the Chinese immigrant populace and the Native American demographic, who are the Native Americans? Don't forget, the answer to that question is one of the foundational arguments on Unehiya's list of acknowledgments, which is the list of things we want the federal government to admit are true regarding the Negro origins of American Indians. Native Americans being mixed is a key part of how we prove we were already here, and once we get Congress to admit that as many as 36 million black Americans are actually Indians, the recognition of that will trigger the awakening for the rest of our own people who are still stuck in the Afrocentric Christian delusion. When the shock wears off, we will finally become a united people again, a mighty nation that can control the politically divided US from the inside. We must become one giant sword wielded by many arms in order to cut the adversary into pieces. Guys, what we're about to talk about is a game changer. In short, Unehiya is a small team of highly capable individuals trying to lobby Congress for federal recognition of black Americans as pre-Columbian American Indians. I'm one of them. I'm the public information officer, so I'm out front recruiting and providing information. I'm also handling PR because of my background in print journalism. I want to appeal to everyone watching this video to support the campaign by joining Unehiya. And guess what? You don't even have to know a single thing about politics or history. Just help us build our list of demands and help each other use Unehiya's genealogy tools to identify your ancestral tribes. Vote yes or no on the hundreds of decisions we have to make. Participate in our tribal town hall meetings after every new moon. If you got any spare change, use it to become a stakeholder in Unehiya, which can be done for as little as $7. You can opt into stakeholder leadership for about $20 if you've got the budget for it. Believe it or not, it only takes 5 minutes to help us reclassify ourselves as Indians. Let's go! We're gonna come back to Dane's drop because we didn't even get to his main point, and Dane pointed out something that the entire conscious community needs to hear, but I want to pivot briefly to Karen Mann. She's a program assistant at the Center for Research on Learning and Teaching, which is an institution at one of the top 25 colleges in the US, University of Michigan, consistently ranked top 3 best public schools nationwide. So Karen Mann's field is history, and in 2014 she published a paper entitled Interracial Marriages in Early America. We're looking at a PDF copy. Page 2 says, quote, "The marriage of Rolfe and Pocahontas was one among thousands of interracial marriages found in the annals of American history. The 1700s French census of France's North American subjects shows that over 50% of marriages were interracial. Over 50%, more than half. The most typical examples of interracial marriage in this period occurred between Indian women and white men." End quote. Don't let this get by you. The author is going out of her way to demonstrate how ubiquitous interracial marriage was between Europeans and Indians. Did you notice what she did? She was talking about John Rolfe and Pocahontas first, and then she immediately hit you with the 1700s French census. No segue. Why? John Rolfe was English, and his marriage to Pocahontas was on the East Coast. The French colonists carved a strip up from modern Louisiana to Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan. These are very different examples from very different distant territories. Karen Mann's trying to drive home a point as succinctly as she can. Her point is that this was happening everywhere. Most Frenchmen married Indian women, period. In general, these marriages were almost never black men with white women either. These were white men consistently pursuing black women. Their offspring would only be Indians by way of their mothers. And you think it's a coincidence that all the Native Americans claim to come from tribes that allegedly operated via matrilineal descent? These tribes didn't start operating that way until they had an abundance of biracial leadership. I'll show you that in more detail in one of my upcoming presentations. The main takeaway here is that credible sources repeatedly prove Native Americans are mixed. Those of us labeled African Americans today are the descendants of the Indians who didn't engage in interracial marriage much. You likely descend from a 10 times great-grandmother who married a full-blooded Indian in her tribe, but her sister married a white man. That biracial lineage married out several more times after that too, with almost each generation, and that's the lineage that eventually wound up on the tribal rolls and removed to Oklahoma. Make sense? Believe it or not, those mixed lineages married Europeans over and over too. That's why most Native American cultures today are predicated on interracial marriage even now. Check out this NPR article. The headline reads, "Native American intermarriage puts benefits at risk." This is what's happening today. And you can listen to the actual broadcast for this story, which ran on Morning Edition on March 31st, 2011. Let's read the lead real quick. Quote, "Native Americans intermarry at higher rates than any other group in the country, according to U.S. Census data." End quote. That's the lead. That was simple. Before we get into anything, this article's already telling us two things. Firstly, Native Americans are extremely mixed. Extremely mixed. So their Indian heritage is often through one native parent with very little aboriginal blood, because with each generation, they've been cutting the indigenous part of their blood in half. So the modern Native American is usually half of half of half of half of half of a half Indian. That person would be at least 96% foreign. Are you hearing me? This is why some of the people teaching us our heritage are mixed Indians. Look at Kurimeo Ahau. Lots of Native Americans look like him. He's what I call a Euro-Indian. In Latin America, él es uno de los indígenas. Es la palabra moderna para los indios. He's what qualifies as the equivalent of a Native American in Costa Rica. He has our ancestors' blood. He just also has their ancestors' blood. Look at Mike TV. He's quick to show you his tribal card, and he teaches us about our indigenous heritage. He's a Creek Indian just like me. But you'll notice that and this is actually universal. You'll notice that the carded Indians typically look like him, mixed. Now, this isn't to say that every light-skinned Indian has to be mixed. But what I'm saying is that that's what a Native American is. Mike TV is a Native American. But we can assume, based on his phenotype, that he probably has a lot more indigenous blood than the average Native American. At the end of the day, some of you call Native Americans Asians or Siberians, not because of evidence, but because you can't imagine how you and they could descend from the same people. This is how. Generations upon generations of intermarriage.
I told y'all how I feel about FBA and Tariq Nasheed. But this is another reason why I did not want y'all attaching me to him. Because he coming at all foreigners as if all foreigners are against us, and that's not true. That's not true. And that's why I got to disagree with that, because I know for a fact, me personally, that foreigners have been helping. Have been helping to push the narrative. I know that for a fact. They got the audacity to come online and start talking like this, no matter how their peers feel inside of the comments. Okay? But no, spreading that message is helping.
I know the Chinese came from melanin because every time I go to a predominantly black, what we consider black, space, I am treated like family. But the truth of the matter is we share a history, and that's why they lie about both of our histories. We share a history, and that's why they lie about both of our histories in the same exact way. The playbook keeps becoming too obvious. The illusions are starting to die. That's why so many Americans are miserable. The actual native ones are the ancient ones, and all the ancient ones are dark-skinned, melanated people. People keep asking me for proof. I'm just the messenger. I just speak the truth I know. Those same people refuse to scroll the comments on my videos. and I saw the melanated community discover their true aboriginal origins. And their emotional response was the exact same as mine when I discovered that I'd been lied to about China.
Now wait till you hear how Dane deep dives this, because his take on this really resonated with me on a spiritual level, and I think the ancestors wanted him to say what he said. But did you catch what she said? She's talking about the inherent connection that she feels with so-called black people. The melanated space she's focused on, though, is that of the United States, where black people are discovering that they're actually the indigenous people of the Americas. She bases the connection she's talking about on the fact that her own people used to be black. She said it herself. The ancient black Asians she's talking about, those aren't just her ancestors. Those are our ancestors too. She's so close to the truth, but she's missing the one part that I've been trying to teach you guys on this channel in several older videos, which is the fact that it's not Native Americans who came from Siberia. We are the ancient black Asians who traveled across the entire Asian continent and passed through Siberia to reach North America. I've done several presentations on this, and I've got a lot more to come. I'll put the most important one on the end screen at the end. Western Canada, Eastern Siberia, Mongolia, and Northern China were all part of a prehistoric society known as Arphaxad. Arphaxad connected Asia to North America, and way later the first Jewish Christians called the Asian side of that Arsarith. I broke down all this and the exact migration route our ancestors took from modern Syria into Canada in the video on the end screen. This woman feels a connection to us more so than to any other melanated community because half of her ancestors are ours. The other half are Europeans. The golden people of the sun are the children of the copper-colored race and the naked semen. Who's the naked semen? Semen is your original state, and it's white. Europeans come out white because they were denied their earth covering. We're the first Asians, and our original society was both over here and over there simultaneously. And I know a lot of you take issue with the spiritual talk, especially when it gets biblical, but that's why you have to hear what Dane Calloway says about this.
So regardless of what, for example, regardless of what religious practice, okay, you believe in, I'm gonna tell you right now, this is so critical that part shouldn't matter. A spiritual warfare consists of all of your people, no matter what your religious belief or spirituality may be, or if you combine them both, because that's not what they're after. They're after your mind. They're about control. So yes, they want more division tactics to be spread amongst us as a people. But this is why I'm so glad that I played this video first, so you can see that it is other foreigners out there that are not only, I'm not trying to say that she was speaking on our behalf, because she was telling what she knows to be true. And that was also linking with her spirit. So she told you that she was a spiritual person. When y'all say that this is biblical, what do you think that is? When y'all say that it was written, what do you think that is?
Them bars though, Dane Calloway, you better come with that. And listen, no, Dane doesn't vibe with everything I'm over here saying, but he doesn't get thrown off by my perspective either, because he's beyond that. This is a message of unity that many of you won't grasp until you have eyes to see and ears to hear. Black Americans who watch this channel are typically people who know that we are indigenous, but a fraction of us, including myself, believe we have equally solid evidence that we are the Yatsaralim, meaning the ancient Israelites. However, let me drop a bombshell on you. You do not need to believe anything specific to be a part of this. Let me repeat that for those in the back. You don't have to believe in Yahweh. I have an upcoming presentation about the fact that ancient Hebrew shamanism never required faith. It wasn't until the predominantly Greco-Roman cult of Christ invented a religion that people were suddenly required to have a specific set of thoughts in their minds to be saved from whatever the hell you think we're supposed to get saved from. The original shamanism wasn't about beliefs. It was about lifestyle. We'll talk more about that soon. The point is, some of you believe we're Indians whose prehistoric ancestors came from Africa, but our ancient ancestors have been here ever since. Others among you believe we're Indians whose prehistoric ancestors were here, our ancient ancestors were here, and our recent ancestors were here. We just always been here. I am among the minority who believe that the best evidence shows that our prehistoric ancestors were in Asia, and our ancient ancestors migrated out of Asia and into both America and Africa. Regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, we're Indians today. We are Indians today. That is the thing we can all agree on, and we can prove it. And there are white people in my comment section. There are Native Americans in the comment section who support the proliferation of the truth because they want to stand for what's right. There are Asians standing up for what's right too. They speak the truth to wake up their own people. The truth affects everyone, not just us. Every ethnic group on the planet is going to have an awakening. But ours is first because it's the catalyst for everyone else's awakenings. It starts with these individual facts we're discussing right now, like Native American identity. They're not Asians, they're mixed, black and white, Amerindian and Euro-American. We are the Asians, and it's only through us that they get their Asian connection. And that means these people are predominantly European.
So even though there was an actual black scientist who proved this and spoke about it, people just couldn't believe him because, I guess because he was black. But then a Chinese scientist proves the first inhabitants of China were black. And somehow it's now no longer debunked. It is actually said that these black tribes owned the southern part of Asia.
And I know right now some of us may be wondering, are there any black Chinese people left right now in present day 2025? I came by this video on TikTok.
今儿菜咸蛋呢，味儿可以吧？挺好，可以，挺好吧？哎呀，这我是大爷啊，大爷特别好钓鱼。
今儿真大风钓鱼了吗？活了！真大风钓鱼了吗？活了！真大风钓鱼了吗？